Chapter 1, Demoting Wife to Concubine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Semi-conscious, Murong Shui felt a sharp pain in her chest. Every breath felt like 1,000 steel needles fiercely stabbing at her heart, so painful that she tightly frowned. She slowly opened her heavy eyelids, but was stunned by the scene that came into her view. White marble tops, red sandalwood chairs, golden pillars, silk brocade marble beds, the resplendent great hall was extremely luxurious. In the corner sat a purple gold twisted wire furnace which was an extremely expensive antique. At the window were two 1-meter tall red corals which were even more precious and almost extinct in the modern era. In addition, the wall was embedded with night pearls, so many that it was overwhelming. Murong Shui couldn't help but be stunned. The modern society would have electric lighting everywhere, but this was furnished so quaintly old-fashioned. Even the palace halls of the Forbidden Palace in Beijing might not be as elegant and luxurious as this. Your Majesty, this humble servant requests that your Majesty grants Princess Yuyuan as my wife and Murong Shui as my concubine. A cold male voice traveled to her ears, destroying the pleasant surprise brought about by the scene in front of her. Murong Shui turned towards the direction of the voice and saw a man dressed in purple red brocade robe standing on the red carpet, in the middle of the big hall. His hair, like black silk, was tied up using a purple gold crown. His expression was calm, his young face handsome beyond comparison, and sharp gaze, ruthless. Murong Shui felt a thud in her head and received a sudden influx of foreign memories, coalescing rapidly with her original memories. Although she couldn't believe it, she had no choice but to admit, her soul had traveled. The owner of this body was also named Murong Shui and was the daughter of the first wife in the house of the Marquis. She had been engaged to Prince Jing, Yi Chen, since young. 3 years ago, Prince Jing had led an army to the borders against the enemy while Murong Shui waited bitterly in the capital city. After waiting for so long for her fiancé's return, unexpectedly, he had returned together with the Princess of Mabe, Qin Yuyuan. He had even publicly requested to marry Qin Yuyuan as his first wife in front of all the court officials and their families during the welcome home banquet, demoting Murong Shui to a concubine. She was caught off guard. Shocked and angry, her old illness had relapsed and she had died. In order to give the title of first wife to Qin Yuyuan, Yi Chen unscrupulously used his military accomplishments to request that the emperor allow the marriage. But what wrong did Murong Shui do? She had only obeyed her parents' wishes to get engaged with Yi Chen. She did not even have a chance to speak to her fiancé before he had demoted her into a lowly concubine. Her ego as the daughter of a prestigious family was stamped upon heartlessly into the ground. Sharpness gleamed Murong Shui's eyes. Facing everyone's looks of sympathy, pity, ridicule, disdain and gloating, she slowly raised her head towards Yi Chen. I had an engagement with you first, Princess Yuyuan's political marriage came second. Don't you think that you are too much to have me demoted to concubine? Astonished looks fell upon Murong Shui. Yi Chen is a war prince and has many military achievements. Even all the court officials would give in and respect him. Murong Shui is only a sickly girl still in her boudoir, and she dared to mercilessly reprimand him. How audacious! The middle-aged emperor sitting on the golden throne also raised his head and looked towards Murong Shui calmly. His sharp and majestic gaze hiding behind white jade tassel, faintly discernible. Murong Shui turned a blind eye to all these and coldly stared at Yi Chen. Yuyuan is the king of Mabe's most favorite princess. Making her my concubine would be humiliating Mabe. The two countries, Qinyan and Mabe, would definitely go to war again. Yi Chen coldly answered without even sparing her a look. His brows revealed a hint of casualness and annoyance. Binov Ka Murong Shui begged to differ, and coldly said, Qinyan is strong as a country with sufficient military strength. If Mabe dares to attack, just send troops to destroy them. Why should the prince be scared of them? I am not afraid of going to war. I just do not want our border soldiers to die without reason. Yi Chen turned around, and condescendingly looked down upon Murong Shui, coldness showing all around the tips of his eyes and brows. If both countries can settle war through a political marriage, why should we still need to have an intense war and sacrifice so many soldiers? Maobei's army is aggressive and will not easily surrender. If they agreed to a peace treaty in a political marriage, it is likely that the 3 years of war has caused them heavy losses such that they need to rest and rejuvenate. Even if Qin Yuan becomes concubine, they will be vexed and angry, and they will harshly criticize, but they will not easily send troops to the border. Yi Chen and Maobei have been at war for 3 years and he definitely knows fully well about Maobei's predicament, but he still used peace between both countries as an excuse. Is it really because he likes Qin Yuan and wishes to take her as his first wife? Murong Shui's mouth curved up with a touch of ridicule, and she coldly looked at Yi Chen. The princes of the royal family are all young and capable. The nobles of the capital also have many young and talented men. Princess Yuan can marry any one of them and form a good relationship between the two countries. She does not have to marry you who already has a marriage agreement. Yi Chen's act of mercilessly demoting Murong Shui as concubine in the Great Hall was simply humiliating her and not giving any respect to her as his fiancée. The original person was angered to death by Yi Chen. She as the precious daughter of a first wife in a prestigious family will not allow anyone to bully her. When both countries came to a truce, the king of Maobei had asked that I personally take care of Princess Yuan. And I had agreed. Yi Chen calmly said, his voice calm and unwavering. A small condition in return for 20 years of peace between Qin Yan and Maobei seemed like a very good deal. Yi Chen was marrying Qin Yuan for the sake of the entire Qin Yan. Demoting Murong Shui to concubine was because he had no other choice. If she continued to reprimand Yi Chen, then she would be considered selfish and unappreciative. In a few words, he had rebuked her criticism. Yi Chen's methods were really to the point and unfathomable. His reputation as the god of war was well deserved. But she, Murong Shui, was also not a weak goat up for slaughter. In that case, Prince Jing and Princess Yuan's marriage cannot be stopped and has no way of changing. Looking into Murong Shui's cool eyes that were like deep pools, Yi Chen's heart clenched, as though something surprising was about to happen. He frowned, and coldly said, "Of course. In that case, I request that my engagement with Prince Jing be annulled." As soon as she said that, the crowd was in an uproar. Murong Shui wants to break off the engagement and not marry the Prince of War who is young and talented and has many military achievements. Is her mind muddled from her sickness? Qin Yan has many young and talented men, but it is impossible to find one who is as accomplished as Yi Chen. Even as his concubine, she will be better off marrying him than marrying another as first wife. A gleam of surprise appeared in Yi Chen's eyes. When he had decided to ask the emperor to grant marriage, he had envisaged all sorts of reactions Murong Shui would have and had already thought of all sorts of countermeasures. However, he did not expect that she would actually suggest annulling the engagement. His blade-like brows flicked up slightly, and he coldly said, "No way." Murong Shui coldly questioned, "Why not?" Yi Chen lowered his eyelids. "If it is annulled, your reputation will be affected. In front of so many people, Prince Jing demoted me to a concubine without any mercy, making me the laughing stock of the capital. My reputation has already been utterly destroyed," Murong Shui icily interrupted, derision showing all around the tips of her eyes and brows. "Are you blaming me?" Yi Chen looked at Murong Chen, danger flashing in his eyes. "I dare not. I only ask that Prince Jing annul the marriage agreement. We each can marry and no longer have any ties." Murong Shui casually answered with hints of derision and perfunctoriness. Chapter 2, Demotion of Wife to Concubine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By admin October 4, 201,625 comments. Yi Chen's face darkened. Lowering his eyes, he patiently explained, "You have been sick for many years, and your body is weak. Even after annulling the engagement, it is impossible for you to marry into a good family. You have a marriage agreement with me, and have waited for me for so long, I will not treat you shabbily. After marrying into the Prince Jing household, you will be the first concubine, and your position will only be slightly lower than the first wife. The first concubine is still a concubine. I am the Marquis' first wife's daughter. No matter how bad the marriage is, I will never be a concubine. Murong Shui harshly rejected his proposal, fire brewing beneath her eyes. She had already been so clear, yet Yi Chen still wanted to take her as concubine. Did he really not understand her, or was he acting as if he did not get her meaning? Yi Chen is young and handsome, with many military accomplishments. He has control of the army and is highly valued by the emperor. Lots of girls from prestigious families in the capital would give up on the first wife position to marry him as concubine, but those people definitely do not include her, Murong Shui. Her cold voice pierced through his eardrums and pounded onto his heart. Yi Chen stiffened and frowned as he looked towards Murong Shui. She wore a dress of pink smoke silk, the edges of the skirt lightly brushed the ground, enhancing the delicate shape of her body. Her hair, like a waterfall, was lightly rolled up using a green snow floral pin, revealing a smooth forehead, and a slightly pale but bright small face. Her black eyes were like stars in the dark sky, calm but determined. It had been 3 years since the last time he had seen her. The weak and sickly girl in his memory, that even the wind could blow her down, had grown in a beautiful young woman. Her gentle nature had also become cold and indifferent. Her gaze directed towards him was even colder, with not a hint of admiration and attachment. This is her, noble and proud, elegant and calm, like the red blossoms in the cold winter months, quietly blooming and presenting her beauty, not making a sound but is exceptionally attractive. When she asked to annul the engagement, she really meant that she wanted to annul the marriage agreement, and it was not a bid to play hard and attract his attention. Her stubbornness had directed the situation into developing the opposite path to which he had envisioned, growing it completely out of his control. He did not like this feeling. A dark haze passed Yi Chen's eyes as he looked up at Murong Shui. Our engagement is our parents' wish, and the matchmaker's words. How can one lightly change it? The engagement my parents agreed upon is for me to marry your highness as first wife and not to become your highness' concubine. When your highness demoted me to a concubine, it already went against the wish of my parents. Yi Chen destroyed the marriage agreement in front of the entire court and still dared to reprimand her for not obeying her parents' wishes. How utterly shameless. If she were to marry this type of person, don't even mention about being a concubine, even if she were the first wife, she would not even give a care for it. Yi Chen's gave her a meaningful look. You still blame me? Such an unfeeling and unrighteous person. He was just wasting her time. All she wants to do now is to draw the line between him and her, and not have anything to do him ever again. Prince Jing is marrying the princess of Mabe for the sake of the people of Qinyan. How could I possibly blame you? By taking the initiative to annul the marriage, I am supporting your highness and the princess, and looking forward to the peace between Qinyan and Mabe. Am I wrong? Unless it is not enough that your highness marries your beloved Princess Yuyuan as first wife, you also want to take me, the ex-fiancée, as concubine, to fulfill your carnal desires. At the last few words, Murong Shui's tone grew heavy. Yi Chen heard the derision in her voice, his handsome face became overcast and his eyes flashed darkly. He gave no care to carnal desires, he allowed Murong Shui to be his concubine because... Miss Murong, please don't be angry. It is all my fault, a gentle female voice suddenly rang out in the great hall. Murong Shui raised her head towards the source only to see a beautiful lady standing behind the marble stage. Glass-colored butterfly hairpin adorned her small delicate fringe, a long tassel hung down, complementing her elegant long dress, the edges of her skirt were embroidered with fresh-looking begonia flowers. It lightly gathered at the waist, reflecting her slim figure and willow-like posture. That exceedingly beautiful little face was full of apology. I did not know that Miss Murong and Prince Jing had a marriage agreement. That's why I came to Qinyan. I am so sorry that it caused a misunderstanding between the both of you. Qin Yuyuan and Yi Yiyuan are deeply in love with each other and have definitely poured their souls out to one another. How could Qin Yuyuan not have known about their marriage agreement? Furthermore, we have been debating about the marriage agreement issue for half a day. Qin Yuyuan did not speak up earlier, or wait till later. She conveniently chose this moment when Yi Chen has been rebuked till he has nothing more to say to speak up. She is obviously trying to help Yi Chen out of his predicament. Murong Shui sneered internally, and calmly said, "Your Highness is too serious. Your Highness is marrying into Qin Yan for peace between both countries. Your Highness' marriage to Prince Jing as first wife is even more so for the millions of citizens of both countries and not for your own selfish reasons. You do not have to be sorry about purposely breaking another's marriage." Qin Yuyuan looked embarrassed, her eyes flashed uncomfortably. Murong Shui pretended not to notice and continued, "As a woman, and with serious illness, I cannot help my country. The only thing I can do is to annul the marriage engagement with Prince Jing, and allow your Highness and Prince Jing to marry, and having a small part in helping the citizens of both countries. I am backing down from this marriage willingly, no one has forced me. Your Highness really needs not blame yourself." Qin Yuyuan faintly smiled, "Miss Murong is righteous in doing so, but I feel guilty about it. If Miss Murong does not mind, I am willing to be the concubine and Miss Murong can be the first wife." Murong Shui raised her eyebrows. They failed by using force, so now they are trying to entice her, letting her be first wife. It's all just empty talk. After marrying into Prince Jing's mansion, the person making all the decisions will be Yi Chen. After the mansion door closes, who knows whether she will be demoted into concubine or a lowly servant. Concubine. Ednel.co even worse, he could give her a bowl of medicine and let her die from serious illness. She's not that stupid and suicidal as to enter the wolves' den. Your Highness is so kind. Murong Shui is extremely grateful. But Shui cannot bear for your Highness to suffer. It is best that our engagement be annulled. Miss Murong. Murong Shui waved her hand to interrupt Qin Yuyuan, looking fixedly at her. How can the Princess of Mabe be a concubine? Even if your Highness does not care, the King of Mabe will, and Prince Jing will definitely not allow your Highness to suffer. Prince Jing is a good person and will definitely treat Miss Murong well after marriage. Qin Yuyuan urgently explained, full of sincerity. Murong Shui scoffed internally and coldly said, "I do not want to come between your Highness and Prince Jing and prevent your marriage. I definitely do not want to be scorned by the people for being a fool and for not being perceptive by impeding upon such a perfect match and happy couple. Please do not stop me from breaking the engagement anymore, your Highness." Upon finishing her speech, Murong Shui bowed towards the Emperor, clearly enunciating her words, "I earnestly request your Majesty to order the relief of the marriage agreement between Prince Jing and I." The calm and determined voice traveled to everyone's ears and the court was astonished. Murong Shui really wants to annul the engagement. Qinyan's capital has countless young ladies adoring the Prince of War, but she is throwing it away like it's something she detests, and giving it to Qin Yuyuan without any reluctance, not wanting it anymore. Qin Yuyuan stiffened, her gentle and moving smile awkwardly froze on her face. Yi Chen's face darkened and he lowered his eyes to cover up the dark flashes within. Chapter 3, Demotion of Wife to Concubine. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. By Admin October 5, 201620 comments. The Emperor gave a meaningful look, his sharp gaze traveled over Yi Chen and fell onto Murong Shui. The marriage agreement between Prince Jing and you was agreed upon by your parents and not by issue of my edict. It will be against reason for me to issue an order to annul the marriage agreement. You had better ask the elders in both families in order to annul the engagement. The Emperor does not wish to meddle in the family matters of his courtiers. Murong Shui narrowed her eyes. She has an idea of how to convince the elders in the Marquis household to agree to break off the engagement, but Yi Chen's direct elders are 1,000 miles away on their fief. The large Prince Jing household only has Yi Chen as the master. If he conceals this and does not invite his elders to the capital, who knows till when shall this engagement drag on before it can be broken off. As though he saw through her worries, the emperor calmly said, I will immediately send a letter to old Prince Jing, and invite him to come to the capital with haste. Thank you so much, your majesty. Murong Xue's anxiety immediately left her. If the emperor personally summoned old Prince Jing into the capital, no matter how audacious Yi Chen was, he wouldn't dare to sabotage. She only needed to wait patiently. Once old Prince Jing arrived, the negotiations to annul the engagement could start. Eyeing her upturned lips and the faint happiness that she was unable to conceal, a dark shadow loomed beneath Yi Chen's eyes. She is this happy for breaking off the engagement with him, huh? The feast has ended. The emperor's sharp eyes scanned though the varied expressions of his courtiers, got up and walked down the golden throne. To the emperor. The court officials kneeled to respectfully send off the emperor. Seeing the emperor's bright yellow silhouette disappear outside the great hall, Murong Xue stood up and with everyone's eyes on her, she calmly waltzed towards the door, without even casting a glance at Yi Chen. Looking at her determined posture, Yi Chen narrowed his sharp eyes. 3 years later, Murong Xue was no longer that weak-bodied, shy-smiling, carefully ingratiating Murong Xue anymore. Your Highness, you and Murong Xue's engagement definitely cannot be annulled. Advisor Su Tianyu quickly walked to Yi Chen's side and quietly reminded him, his eyes flashing with severity that only they could understand. I am aware. Yi Chen looked away, the black of his eyes deep. Go to Prince Jing mansion. Tell Seneschal Wang to represent me and present the bride price to the Marquis household. I want to marry Murong Xue as concubine in 3 days. Yes, sir. Su Tianyu nodded and strode out of the great hall. BL.net Yi Chen looked towards the direction Murong Xue had disappeared to with deep eyes. He is Prince Jing, that who holds the reins of the military. On the other hand, Murong Xue is a weak girl with a serious illness and without any remarkable talents. By allowing her to be his concubine he is already complimenting her. He has already promised the position of first wife to Yu Yuan, Murong Xue had better not meddle in it for even a bit. Murong Xue had no idea what Yi Chen was thinking. After leaving the palace, escorted by her maid, she sat onto the Marquis household's carriage. The carriage was made of incense wood. Inside the carriage, there was a wardrobe, a marble table with a pot of tea on it, a chess set, a bookshelf and many other furnishings readily available, like a mini-bedroom. The implements on the table were very delicate, every one of them priceless items. In the corner, a purple gold stove was lit with expensive orchid perfume. The understated luxury made Murong Xue look down. She remembered that she had agreed to her best friend's, Ning Qinchin's, invitation to go on a holiday to Hawaii. Unfortunately, the private jet had met with a strong storm mid-journey. So strong that even the experienced pilot could not avoid, even though he had tried his very best. The new model was torn to pieces by the storm and her body would have definitely been destroyed till nothing was left. In the sudden darkness that overcame her, she thought that she was a goner. She did not expect that when she opened her eyes again, she would have been reborn. And actually reborn into such an ancient world. How unbelievable. Isn't that the page boy Xuangxi? A young girl's uncertain question traveled to her ears. Murong Xue looked up and saw a young boy of about 14.15 years, standing at the door of a mansion, his young face gloomy. He was, without a doubt, Xuangxi. Murong Xue's eyes flashed, and gently said, "Stop the carriage." After the carriage was steady, she was helped out of the carriage by her maid, then slowly walked towards the young boy. Sensing someone nearing, the boy quickly turned around and came face to face with Murong Xue's beautiful features. His eyes were widened and he was stunned, then he stammered, Young mistress. What was she doing here? Murong Xue hummed in answer and asked, "The young master is inside." Xuangxi was her twin brother Murong Ye's personal servant. If Xuangxi was here, then Murong-yi would definitely be too. Heh heh, Xuanxi laughed unnaturally, eyes flashing. Well. Well, watching him hawing and humming, unable to explain himself, Murong Shui raised her eyebrows and walked past him into the big courtyard. In the original person's memory, Murong Yi was a rich playboy that only knew how to enjoy himself, often forgetting the time. It was not uncommon for him to stay out all night. In a month, he would spend over 20 days outside. How rare to run into him. Of course she had to go and see him. Walking through the large doors, Murong Shui saw dozens of metal cages on the side of the vast training field. In the cages were black, white, and gray dogs. In the middle of the field, a round dot-shaped area of about 20 square meters was encircled with a red fence, and within it were a black hound and a gray large hound fighting. The hounds had cuts all over their bodies, their flesh turning outwards. Red blood coated their fur with large patches here and there, their muscular bodies bloody, but they seemed not to notice. They were still entangled with each other, wildly biting and scratching. A young boy in green was standing outside of the fence staring fixedly at the fighting dogs, shouting excitedly, "Bite, bite, bite harder. General Black, bite it to death, snap." As though the black dog had understood him, it savagely bit onto the gray dog's neck until the gray dog breathed its last breath. The young boy in green looked at the broken carcass of the gray and laughed out loud, "Murong Yi, you have lost again. Ha ha ha, after half a day of fighting dogs, every dog that you had bought died. I really don't know what to say about your taste in picking things." Murong Yi's handsome face turned slightly black and said unconcedingly, "You've only won a few rounds in a row, what is there to brag about? I will immediately buy a ferocious one and completely destroy yours. You have said the same thing for over a dozen times, so much that my ears are going to fall off. Yet I have not seen you win a single round." The young boy in green's lips curled contemptuously as his finger quickly moved through the wad of bills that he had won. His sore spot touched on, Murong Yi reddened and fiercely said, "I was careless previously. That's why I kept losing. This time I will be more careful and I will definitely beat you. Xuanxi, bring me the money, I wish to choose a dog." Xuanxi needed the flat purse and walked up with a sour face, "Young master, we don't have any more money." Murong Yi frowned, "Didn't I ask you to bring 5.6 thousand silver taels? Why has it finished so quickly?" Xuanxi laughed bitterly, "Young master, you bought 4 dogs, each costing 500 taels. In addition, each stake was 1,000 taels, all right, you can stop detailing the accounts. Hurry and go home to draw more money." Murong Yi interrupted Xuanxi irritably. Since Su Tianan dared to laugh at his lack of taste, he will splash more money to buy a few more fierce dogs and make him lose every penny. Let's see how arrogant he will be then. Chapter 4, Pranking Rich Playboys. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By admin October 6, 201,613 comments. There are a few blocks between the Marquis Mansion and here. By the time you bring the money, the sky will be dark. How are we going to fight dogs then? Su Tianan casually said, lazily. Murong Yi's face darkened, "My money has been used up, and the dog fighting arena and gambling stakes do not allow credit. If I don't go back to redraw money, how am I to continue competing with you? You can use the pretty lady behind you as collateral." Su Tianan looked diagonally behind Murong Yi, smiling sinisterly. "Pretty lady? What pretty lady?" Murong Yi looked behind him blankly in confusion, only to see Murong Shui standing 2 meters away, looking faintly at him. His heart jumped. "Sister, what you doing here?" "Sister." Su Tianan did a double take. When he saw Xuanxi respectfully following behind her, he had thought that she was Murong Yi's little lover. He never expected her to be Murong Yi's sister, the one who is engaged to Prince Jing, Yi Yichen. Rumors had it that she had a serious illness and a weak constitution, thus she lived deep in the mansion and seldom showed her face. He didn't expect her to be such a beauty. I was passing by and saw you here, so I came in. Murong Shue's cold voice traveled through one's ears and hit straight to the heart. Su Tianan's heart fluttered. His brother Su Tianyu often followed at the side of Prince Jing. According to him, Prince Jing does not like this fiancée of his and even intends to demote her to a lowly concubine. If he humiliates her, does that give Prince Jing a reason to demote her to concubine? When that happens, and Prince Jing feels pleased, Prince Jing might even give him a reward. He would have gotten the lady and the Prince Jing's praise. Definitely a worthy proposition. Su Tianan's eyes brightened and sinisterly sized up Murong Shui from top to bottom. She's so delicate and pretty, that body is definitely delicious and soft. He really felt like taking her into his arms and harshly ravaging her. Murong Yi, don't talk about sibling love. Hurry and give me a firm word on whether you are going to use her as your collateral. Su Tianan, watch your mouth. This is my sister, not an item, how can I use her as collateral? Murong Yi sharply interrupted him, his face black till it could almost drip ink. Su Tianan was unconcerned, what sister? It's just a girl, money. Losing goods, what's there to be precious about? If I were you, I would immediately use her as collateral to exchange for a few thousand taels, pick a good dog, and earn back my ego. And when the servants bring back the money, then just redeem her. I am not as inhuman as you as to sacrifice my sister's reputation just to fight dogs. Murong Yi's face filled with anger. If the proud Marquis household's young mistress was used like an item for collateral at a coliseum, the public cynicism would be enough to drown her. Wherever she would go, she would be laughed at till she's unable to look up. Stop sounding so righteous. I think you're just scared of losing. Su Tianan leaned against the fence and looked sideways to Murong Yi, eyes filled with arrogance. You are afraid that your taste is so bad that even if you choose 100 dogs, you wouldn't be able to win a single round. By then, you would have lost your sister in your face. Shut up, Su Tianan. Taunted, Murong Yi's chest filled with anger and thundered, all ready to pounce on Su Tianan and beat him up. Murong Shui pulled him back and walked a few steps up front. She coldly stared at Su Tianan. My brother's luck is just a little bad today. You don't need to goad him. If you wish to fight dogs, I will accompany you. Murong Yi might be a useless playboy, but he is very protective of her. Naturally, she will not stand on the sidelines and watch him get ridiculed. Su Tianan widened his eyes in surprise. You will fight dogs with me. Murong Shui is a gentle and weak lady, brought up in the depths of the mansion. He reckoned that she has not even seen cock-fighting or cricket-fighting. Now she wants to dog-fight with him. Is he imagining it? Can't I? Murong Shui said coldly. Of course you can. Su Tianan looked at her determined gaze and confirmed that she wasn't joking, but was serious about dog-fighting with him. He haughtily smiled. As long as she was not afraid that the splashes of blood would make her faint, he didn't mind. Pay up the 500 taels and choose a dog. How much will you put as stake? For this round, we shan't gamble with money, but we'll stake a finger. Murong Shui's cold voice traveled into his ears. Su Tianan froze mid-action while taking out the bills and looked at her in shock. You mean whoever loses will have to cut off a finger? That's right. Murong Shui nodded. Do you dare to accept the bet? Of course I dare. Su Tianan raised his chin arrogantly and wantonly sized up Murong Shui. Those lecherous eyes openly showed his wretched and evil desires. I know best how to take care of ladies. Even if you lose, I won't cut off your finger. You just need to serve me well for a night and we'll call it, smack. A slap harshly hit Su Tianan's face, cutting him off and turning his head to the side. A bright red 5-fingered print immediately formed on half of his face, hot and painful. Murong Shui, you dare to hit me. Su Tianan was furious. Spitting out the blood at the corner of his mouth, he viciously pounced towards Murong Shui. He wants to teach her a lesson. How overconfident. Murong Shui laughed coldly and kicked Su Tianan. Su Tianan did not expect that and got kicked in the stomach. He fell to the ground wincing with his brows knitted, and stared hatefully at Morong Shui. If you agree to the stakes, just nod your head. If not, just shake your head. There's no need to say so much rubbish. Morong Shui looked down at him condescendingly, full of contempt and disdain. Su Tianan choked. That hateful little girl who has never seen the world actually dared to hit him, kick him, laugh at him, and caused him to lose his face. How reckless of her. If she wants to court death, he'll grant her wish. Thinking bitterly, Su Tianan stood up and quickly walked to the metal cages, pointing at the dogs within, saying, I want this one, that one, and this one. Bring them all over. Morong Yi gave Morong Shui a complicated look. In his impression, his sister was a gentle and beautiful lady. When he heard that he wanted to fight dogs, he was so shocked that by the time he got out of his daze, she had already finished negotiating all the terms with Su Tianan. The dog fight was on and he could do nothing to stop it. He lamented in his heart, because he as the older brother had not taken good care of his sister had rashly set the stakes. If his sister loses, he'll cut his finger on behalf of his sister. He has been using these 10 fingers for the last 14 years and is quite reluctant to cut whichever of them. Watching Su Tianan buy 4, 5 dogs at one go, he shouted angrily, Su Tianan, you and my sister are only betting on one round, you only need to choose one. Why did you choose so many? Su Tianan glanced at him, I liked them. What do you care? Morong Ye's face darkened, you have picked all the fierce dogs away, leaving a bunch of useless sick dogs. You obviously want her to lose, so what? Su Tianan raised his chin and unabashedly admitted, if she has ability, why doesn't she pick a champion from the sick dogs and bite my dog to death? You, Morong Ye's stare at Su Tianan could almost spit fire, despicable coward. Su Tianan coldly snorted and ignored him, urging irritably, it's getting late, do you want to fight dogs or not? If not, I'm going home. It's just another despicable, disgusting and old ploy. She really couldn't be bothered. Morong Shui laughed coldly and slowly walked up. Her calm eyes passed over the cages and stopped at a cage in the utmost corner. Chapter 5, Pranking Rich Playboys. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By admin October 7, 201,617 comments. In the cage was a small dog. Its fur matted with dirt, making it difficult to discern whether it was white or gray. Its small head rested on this front paw, eyes closed. Its body was half the size of its neighbor, and both its ears were drooping, seemingly lethargic. Morong Shui's eyes flashed and pointed towards the small dog, that's the one. Morong Ye's initial optimism faded and his heart sank. He knew it. His sister was a kind-hearted, sympathetic good girl, but, this is a coliseum. If you choose a dog that's so sickly and close to death to fight, you will definitely lose. Choose another. No need to choose again. This dog is good enough, Morong Shui said softly, and personally opened the cage. The small dog heard the noise and slowly opened its eyes, looking at Morong Shui's warm smile. Its black eyes glinted with brightness, and it slowly stood up and leisurely walked out of the cage towards the arena. Its thin and small body seemed like it would fall with a single gust of wind. Morong Yi was speechless. This can be considered not bad. After entering the arena, there is no need to even fight, that fierce hound's aura is enough to frighten it to death. Such a lousy dog. It was definitely caught to make up the numbers. Anyone with eyes would never choose it. Su Tianan leaned against the fence, watching his General Yellow strut into the arena, arrogantly walking to the front of the small dog and looking down upon it. Its big body shadowed the small dogs closely, like a strict elder arrogantly looking down on a misbehaving child. He sneered internally. Usually when one fights dogs, even if one doesn't know how to choose, they would at least choose a large and intimidating hound. Morong Shui actually bought such a small and skinny dog for the fight. What an utter idiot. After at most a few rounds, this dog will be torn to pieces by his General Yellow. When that happens, he will teach Murong Shui a hard lesson. Let's see if she still dares to show off in front of him. Dang! The bell to signal the start of the fight rang. General Yellow's aura immediately sharpened and it howled towards the sky, pouncing ferociously towards the small dog. In contrast, the small dog stood there quietly, not moving. His black eyes following General Yellow as the hound came closer and closer. It is unknown whether the small dog did not know how to react, or whether it was stunned. But with such a vast contrast, it was obvious that the small dog would come to a terrible end. Murong closed his eyes as he couldn't bear to watch. Crack! A dull sound traveled into the audience's ears, and the wild howling suddenly stopped. Murong's heart dropped to pit bottom. Just one move and the small dog has been bitten to death. How utterly useless. He had already said earlier that she can't buy that sick dog, but she still did not believe him. Great. Now that the dog is dead, and his sister has lost miserably, his one finger will soon be chopped off. How can this be? How is it that General Yellow is the one that's dead? Su Tianan's shocked exclamation, full of disbelief, traveled into his ears. Murong stopped. What? That General Yellow is dead. Looking towards the arena, he saw the mighty General Yellow lying on the ground with its throat ripped out and fresh blood flowing out. Its fierce eyes were blank and it was not breathing, it was obviously dead. The small and skinny dog stood in front of it, looking down upon the dead hound. Its back was straight and eyes cold like a haughty ruler. Murong's eyes widened in surprise. It is really General Yellow that's dead. Such a small and skinny dog used only one move to bite the strong and ferocious General Yellow to death. How incredible! Su Tianan, you have lost. Fulfill the bet. Murong Shui calmly stated, her voice flat. A servant of the Colosseum carried a prepared tray and quickly walked up to Su Tianan. On the red cloth of the tray laid an unsheathed dagger. Its sharp edge reflecting coldly under the sunlight, piercing painfully through Su Tianan's eyes. He has lost. He will really need to cut off one of his fingers. How can this be? He is the almighty and precious youngest son of the minister's household. How can he become a cripple with missing fingers? Su Tianan's gaze turned cold and he hurried to the dog cage that he had bought, and opened it. Dogs leaped out of the cage and ferociously pounced towards the small dog in the arena. Bite it to death, bite it to death. Su Tianan watched the chaotic arena, and wildly shouted. His eyes were red and he had only one thought in his mind, if his dogs bite Murong Shui's dog to death then he will win and no longer need to cut off his finger. Su Tianan, what are you doing? Going back against your word. Murong was furious and ready to ask the staff of the Colosseum to separate the dogs. Just then, the small dog leaped up. Its gray silhouette moved between the group of dogs like a flash of light. Crack, 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 4 dull sounds rang and all the large fierce hounds had their necks torn out. They fell to the ground awkwardly, eyes wide open without life. The small dog was unharmed. It puffed out its chest and stood proudly in the center of the arena. Murong gaped. That was 1 against 4, and it won so beautifully. This dog is so powerful. It seems that dogs with a fierce physical appearance might not be fierce and strong, and dogs that looks weak and sickly might not be weak when facing enemies. Su Tianan had picked so many dogs, yet all died under this small dog. It was his complete defeat and he had no excuse to not fulfill the bet. Murong had been ridiculed by Su Tianan so much previously, today, he has finally won a round. He can walk with his head high now. Ha ha ha, after cutting a finger off of him, let's see how arrogant he can continue to be. He looked gloatingly towards Su Tianan only to see him staring at the bloody arena, eyes wild with panic. All the dogs he had bought are dead. He has lost to Murong Shui. He will need to cut off his finger. How could this happen? He definitely cannot become a handicapped. Su Tianan's eyes hardened. He snatched up the dagger on the tray and rushed towards Murong Shui in a rage. She tried to arrogantly force him to submit in public. How dare she? She wants a finger, doesn't she? Then he'll cut off her finger to give to her. Su Tianan, you despicable coward. Murong Yi paled and thundered. He was just going to snatch the dagger when he saw Murong Shui turn slightly to the side to avoid the vicious attack and flipped her wrist. The dagger that was in Su Tianan's hand instantly transferred over to her hand. She waved her hand and the sharp dagger swept across his left hand, cutting off all 5 fingers from the knuckles. Blood squirted and splashed onto the yellow soil of the ground, the red blood shone brightly against it. Su Tianan's screams pierced through the air, "Ah! Young master!" A page boy standing not far exclaimed and ran hurriedly to Su Tianan, ripped off a length of cloth from his robes, grabbed his master's injured hand and rapidly bandaged it. Su Tianan stood shakily, his face white and drained of blood. He looked at Murong Shui, eyes almost spitting fire. Our bet was 1 finger. How could you cut 5? His left hand was entirely destroyed. From today, he would be considered a real useless person. We had initially agreed to gamble 1 round for 1 finger. You let go of 5 dogs, that's 5 rounds, and all 5 rounds were lost. Of course it should be 5 fingers cut. Murong Shui said slowly, putting the blood-coated dagger back onto the tray. She had planned to cut only 1 finger off of Su Tianan. But since he tried to attack her despicably, then he shouldn't blame her for not being merciful. Chapter 6, Bride Price. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By Sandy. October 8, 201,617 comments. Her crisp voice rang in his ears. His eyes on fire, Su Tianan gritted, I only agreed that the first round stake to be a finger. I did not specify what the stakes for the last 4 rounds were. Who allowed you to make that decision? This sickly little bitch seems to be quite skilled. He doesn't dare confront her head on. But since she had cut off 5 of his fingers, he will cut 4 of hers in compensation. Murong Shui glanced at him. After the first dog died, you didn't say a single word before letting out another 4. Isn't that a continuation of the gamble from the first round? If you wanted to change the stakes, why didn't you say anything? Now that the 5 rounds are over, you claim that it is unfair. Don't you think that's too shameless? You. Su Tianan choked. At that time, he had only thought of killing that weak little dog to save his finger. He didn't think that far. If you want to gamble, then you must be prepared to lose. There are so many people in this Colosseum watching. Our bet was definitely fair. Even if you want to fight in the Dali Temple Court, I have no qualms. If you are not resigned, and prepared to find someone to teach me a lesson, that's fine. I'll be at the Marquis Mansion waiting for your arrival anytime. The dogs in the Colosseum are for the guests' enjoyment. After buying them, the dogs become the guests' private property. Whether dead or alive, the guests can take it with them. Maid Hongxiu followed closely behind Murong Shui, calmly walking out. Murong Yi raised his eyebrows and glanced at the bloodied Su Tianan, who was filled with anger and unwillingness to admit defeat, and hurriedly followed after. Sister, wait for me. In second-floor suite of the Colosseum sat 2 men who had watched the entire scene play out in front of them. She made the capital's playboy so miserable just by casually picking a dog. This Murong young mistress is quite amazing. The man in tan robes tutored his praise, full of amazement. He glanced toward the man in white robes next to him and said, smiling, what does your lordship think? The man in white robes' jade-like fingers lightly caressed the white marble wine cup, his eyes slightly lowered, and did not say a word. The man in tan robes did not mind and continued talking to himself. Also, the way she had snatched the dagger and that move to cut off the fingers, it's so smooth and quick that it's unbelievable. She must have inherited that from the first marquis. And the rumors in the capital actually spread that she is a helpless, useless, and weak young lady. How hilarious. The man in white raised his eyes and looked towards Murong Shue's delicate silhouette slowly walking further and further away. His obsidian eyes flashed something incomprehensible. The Colosseum and the Marquis mansion was not far. After walking out of the front doors, Murong Shue did not return to the horse carriage, but walked the small dog and slowly traveled, leisurely admiring the olden beauty of the streets and infrastructure. Murong Yi followed closely behind her, smiling ingratiatingly. "Sister, how did you know that this small weak dog is so powerful?" After fighting dogs for so many years, he can be considered to have developed a pair of expert eyes when it comes to examining dogs, but when it came to this small dog, he had looked at it from left to right, top to bottom, and still couldn't figure out how to tell that it is such a powerful dog. Because it is not a normal dog, but a Tibetan Mastiff. Murong Shue calmly explained. Tibetan Mastiffs are resolute and good at attacking, normal dogs are totally not their match. Tibetan Mastiff. What kind of dog is that? Murong Yi often fought dogs and had developed an understanding of the types of dogs, but it was his first time hearing about Tibetan Mastiffs. He had racked his brain yet he had not been able to figure out anything about it. However, this did not prevent him from developing a love for this dog. "Sister, can you give me this Tibetan Mastiff? I'll exchange it with 5,000 taels, no, 10,000 taels. Murong Shue turned her head towards Murong Yi only to see him wearing a bamboo-embroidered dark blue robe. His dark hair was tied up using a marble crown, revealing a smooth forehead. His handsome face was slightly innocent, skin white, lips red, and black marble-like eyes shining, a really beautiful young man. But when she thought of how this young man is actually famous in the capital for being a playboy, playing with horses and birds, and not willing to learn, she said, "I don't like money." That's right. His sister lives in the mansion where food, clothes, accommodation and materials have all been taken care of. She also doesn't go out of the mansion easily, and thus doesn't have many opportunities to spend. It is quite inappropriate for him to exchange money for the Tibetan Mastiff. Oh. Then what about giving you a few suits of rare clothing and jewelry? Murong Yi said smiling, all girls like pretty clothes and jewelry, and his sister shouldn't be an exception. Murong Shue continued to undermine his negotiation mercilessly. "Any clothes or jewelry that you can buy, I can too." "Alright. The best clothes come from Yixiang Court and the best jewelry in the capital comes from Duobao Court." No matter whether it was him shopping, or his sister, they will both be able to buy about the same things. "Then what will it take for you to give me that Tibetan Mastiff?" Murong Ye's despondent voice was laced with dejection. "There are so many dogs in the Colosseum, you can buy another one." "Why do you want my Tibetan Mastiff?" "Tibetan Mastiffs are fierce and loyal and they are very rare." Murong Shue was prepared to bring it back to the Marquis mansion and use it as a guard dog so that it no longer needed to live a life of fighting in the arena. "This Tibetan Mastiff is so powerful. All the other dogs that I thought was good had been bitten to death by it." Murong Yi looked towards the Mastiff, eyes filled with passion. "If you give it to me, I can use it to battle with the others and win back all the money that I have lost." Murong Shue halted suddenly. Murong Yi didn't notice and almost knocked into her. He stumbled a few steps before he regained his balance and asked, puzzled, "What's the matter, sister?" Murong Shue didn't answer but instead coldly stared straight ahead. Murong Yi followed her gaze only to see dozens of servants carrying numerous trunks standing at the front of the Marquis mansion. The trunks were made of incense wood, embellished with numerous round gold buttons, dignified yet not losing any of its splendor. One look and one would be able to tell that it was expensive. The items within were naturally even more precious. A middle-aged man in dark blue robes walked out from the crowd towards the Marquis mansion. "Seneschal Wang!" Murong Yi softly exclaimed. Upon hearing the exclamation, the middle-aged man stopped and looked over. Seeing that it was Murong Yi and Murong Shue, he clasped his hands together in salute. young Marquis, Miss Murong. Murong Shue's father was originally the commander of the three armies. He was seriously injured when fighting in the front lines 10 years ago and died from his injuries. When her mother heard of the bad news, she was so depressed that she passed away not long after, leaving behind the 4-year-old twins. As such, the Marquis is now 14-year-old Murong-yi. Murong-yi hummed calmly and pointed towards the long line of procession that was carrying trunks, and asked, puzzled, Seneschal Wang, what are you doing? Seneschal Wang lightly smiled, Your Honor, I have been ordered by His Highness to bring the bride price and negotiate a day to marry Miss Murong. Murong-ye's eyes brightened. His sister was going to get married, that's good news, although, my sister is to be Prince Jing's wife. Yi Chen should personally deliver the bride price. Why did he let you bring it? Also, in accordance to the traditions of the princess, the bride price should be 120 trunks, why did you only bring 64? The Prince Jing household is a prince's household, and Prince Jing had just delivered war achievements, he should not be lacking in money, should he? Chapter 7, A Thrashing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By admin October 9, 201637. Comments. The Marquis household is a noble family, not lacking in gold and silver. They don't really care about Prince Jing's bride price, but now, when the bride price is given, not only did Prince Jing not personally come, the amount is much less than what is normal. Prince Jing obviously does not respect his sister. If he accepts the bride price without a word, his sister will definitely become a laughing stock. Listening to his reproach, Seneschal Wang showed disbelief. His Highness had already announced to the capital that he will be marrying Miss Murong as his concubine. Your Honor did not know. Murong was startled, surprised and angry. When did this happen? Just at the welcome feast earlier. All the court officials have heard it. Your Honor actually has not heard of it. Did you not attend the feast? Seneschal Wang said softly but teasingly. Murong-yi gave an uncomfortable light cough. He had not been back to the mansion for a few days. Although he knew that Yi Chen had returned to the capital victorious from the war, he did not know that the welcome feast was today. His Highness is forced to follow with this poorer plan to achieve peace between Qinyan and Mabe. Miss Murong has suffered because of it, but I hope Your Honor can be magnanimous enough to forgive. The Prince's Seneschal bowed deeply and respectfully towards Murong-yi to convey his apology. Murong-yi stared at Seneschal Wang, a complicated expression flitted past his face. It was a while before he said, well, since your prince does not like my sister, then let's annul the engagement. There's no need to act so falsely and humiliate my sister. Seneschal Wang froze, a look of surprise appeared. He didn't think that this useless playboy would also suggest annulling the engagement after hearing his sister get demoted to concubine level. My sister is the Marquis household's wife. Born daughter. Even though both our parents have passed away and she is sick and weakly, she is still of noble status. Any noble gentleman in the capital will be willing to take her as his first wife. She has no need to lower her status and become someone's concubine. Murong-ye's determinate and strong voice traveled into his ears. Seneschal Wang smiled faintly. It seems that the Murong family has a strong backbone. It's too bad their opponent is Prince Jing. Your Honor, His Highness is also in a difficult position. Murong-yi waved his hand and interrupted his speech, looking coldly at him. Yi Chen is well versed in the art of war. If he really likes my sister and wishes to marry her as first wife, he would have fought so hard that Mabe would have taken the initiative to surrender without daring to mention a single condition. Demoting my sister to a concubine for the sake of peace between both countries. You dare to give me such a cursory excuse? Do you think I am 3 years old? After being idle for so many years, he is still able to evaluate the situation clearly, hitting all the key points. Murong-yi is an exceptionally smart person. However, the marriage to Murong Shui is very important to the prince. The prince will definitely not allow Murong-yi to break it off. Your Honor, I am only obeying the prince's orders to give the bride price. Please do not make things difficult for us, Seneschal Wang said softly, giving a look to the servants carrying the trunks. The servants understood his signal and carried the trunks towards the front door of the marquis mansion, so quickly that the others could not react in time. By the time Moroni realized, the first few servants of the possession had already carried the bride price into the marquis mansion. What are you all doing? Moroni thundered, angry and agitated. He ran quickly into the mansion and fiercely kicked the trunks over. The servants carrying the trunks did not expect that, and the trunks between them flipped over onto the ground, spilling over the countless gold and silver jewelry, antiques and paintings, and silk satin. Every one of those items were extremely valuable and blinded everyone's eyes. But Moroni did not even notice. He glared angrily at the servant and snapped, "This is the marquis mansion, not your Prince Jing mansion. You all dare to force your way in. Who gave you the courage?" The servant lowered their heads, silent, but unknown whether it was intentional or not, their eyes casted glances to the side. Moroni followed the direction of their glances and saw Seneschal Wang. The fury in his eyes burned like fire. Seneschal Wang is Yi Chen's closest aide. If he asked the servants to force their way into the marquis mansion, then it must be based upon Yi Chen's instruction. I had initially thought that Yi Chen is an upright man and a great hero. Even if we did not become relatives, we could still be friends. I never imagined he would turn out to be such a despicable person. Failing to abide by the marriage agreement, and even worse, using his power to try and force my sister into being his concubine. How very shameless. Although my household is not as noble as Prince Jing's, but we will not allow others to trample over us wantonly. Seneschal Wang, go back and tell Yi Chen. The Murong family no longer cares for him. Even if he wants to take my sister as his first wife now, we will no longer be interested. We want to annul the engagement. Even before the marriage, he had insulted his sister as such. After marriage, he will definitely be worse. If his sister marries into Prince Jing's household, it would be like marrying into a den of monsters. She might lose her life at any time. Everyone looked at him in shock. He dared to call Prince Jing despicable. How audacious. Murong Yi did not bother to notice, and he sharply ordered, "Throw these dirty things out." "Yes, sir." The guards of the marquis mansion hurriedly walked up, as though they had just woken up from a dream, picked up Prince Jing's servants and the bride price those servants had brought and mercilessly threw them out. Murong Yi watched the chaos and cries of Prince Jing's people, his fury gradually calming. He walked up and took Murong Shue's hand, striding towards the marquis mansion. "Let's go in, lest these filthy people offend our eyes." "All right." Murong Shue nodded happily. Yi Chen had disregarded her wishes and forcibly tried to give the bride price in order to take her as concubine. She, too, was disgusted and had been ready to harshly teach Seneschal Wang and his gang a lesson. She never expected Murong Yi to take action first and mercilessly push back against the arrogance of the people from Prince Jing's household. He swept Prince Jing's face to the ground and defended her. "There's no need for her to make any move, she'll just sit back and enjoy the benefits." Watching Murong Yi and Murong Shue step into the mansion and walking further away, Seneschal Wang narrowed his sharp eyes. He had delivered the bride price, but Murong Yi did not accept it. He had completed the prince's task. However, he did have another thing to notify Murong Yi about. "Your Honor, the prince will be here 3 days later to take Miss Murong as his concubine." Crack. A piece of wood flew and hit Seneschal Wang in the mouth, making him swallow his words. Seneschal Wang turned livid, and coldly looked towards the delicate figure in front of him. He spat out a mouthful of blood. 2 white teeth were mixed in with the blood, making it particularly noticeable. The chaotic crowd froze and looked at each other. Who was so audacious as to slap Seneschal Wang on the mouth? They quietly looked up only to see Murong Shue silently standing a few meters away on the bluestone road, back. Facing them. Her cold voice traveled with the wind into everyone's ears. Who dares to cause trouble in front of the Marquis Mansion's front door? All guards of the Marquis Mansion, listen to my orders. Anyone who tries to force their way into the mansion, or speak nonsense in front of the mansion's main doors, chase them out with your swords regardless of their lives." "Yes, ma'am." The guards answered, and enthusiastically started chasing away the people from Prince Jing's household. Chaos in the front of the mansion ensued. Morongyi ignored all that and looked at Morong Shui in surprise. "Sister, where did you learn martial arts from?" Just by picking up a piece of wood and throwing it strongly, you had knocked off 2 of Seneschal Wang's teeth. Seneschal Wang is known for being a martial arts expert, and he didn't even manage to avoid your thrashing. When did you become so powerful? Chapter 8, Teaching the Cousin a Lesson. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By admin October 11, 201,610 comments. What martial arts? I've only seen too many of the guards sparring and picked up a few moves. Morong Shui causally said, her eyes flashing uncomfortably. Being reborn is too unbelievable a story. If it had not happened to her, she definitely would not believe either, not to mention Morongyi, who was only 14 years of age. If she had told him the truth, Morongyi might think that she had been bewitched. She had better keep that secret to herself. Really? Morongyi frowned, obviously not believing a single word she had said. Of course, why should I lie to you? Seeing that Morongyi wanted to further pursue the topic, Morong Shui quickly said, "It's getting late. I'm going to take the Tibetan Mastiff for a bath. It's so dirty that it is definitely uncomfortable." Upon hearing the 2 words, Tibetan Mastiff, he immediately forgot about his suspicions and looked towards the Tibetan Mastiff, eyes shining. "Since you are not feeling too well, sister, you shouldn't work too hard. Leave this type of manual labor to me." Morong Shui smiled, "I'm going to ask the maids to wash it, not do it myself. What hard work can there possibly be?" Morongyi shook his head disagreeing. "The mastiff's fur is so matted that you can't even tell what the original color is. It must have utterly soiled. Those maids in your house are all so skinny, they wouldn't have enough strength. They probably wouldn't even be able to wash it out before dark. You had better pass the dog to me and I'll ask the male servants to wash it clean before giving it back to you." Since his sister treated the Tibetan Mastiff so preciously, and refused to lend it to him, he'll establish a good relationship with the dog. And then when his sister doesn't notice, he'll take it out on the sly. That would be enough to build his reputation. Alright then. Morong Shui reluctantly nodded, and reluctantly put the Tibetan Mastiff into Morong Ye's arms and carefully instructed him, "Its fur has knotted, so tell the servants to be careful when they are washing it. Don't pull on the fur." I know. Morong Yi nodded his head and quickly walked the dog away. The Tibetan Mastiff is a rare and powerful dog and his future god of wealth. Of course he will instruct the servants to be careful. After walking for a bit, he halted and turned around to look at Morong Shui. Under her curious gaze, he asked tentatively, "Sister, I didn't ask for your opinion before I decided to annul your engagement. You don't blame me, do you?" In this year, he had been spending less and less time at home, and had only seen his sister a handful of times. But he knew well that his sister really liked Yi Chen. "Of course not," Morong Shui laughed softly and carelessly said, "When Yi Chen demoted me to concubine during the welcome feast, I had already raised the annulment. His Majesty was not against it and actually ordered old Prince Jing to come to the capital to discuss matters regarding the annulment." "Really?" Morong Ye's eyes brightened. "You don't like Yi Chen anymore?" Morong Shui sniffed, "Such a terrible person is not deserving of my affections." "That's exactly right." Morong Yi nodded in agreement. "Yi Chen does not have you in his heart and eyes. He is not the best person for you. It is absolutely correct to have taken the initiative to annul the engagement and cleanly break your ties off with him." Woof woof woof. The little Tibetan Mastiff saw that the 2 persons were conversing without a care for anyone else and couldn't help but bark. Morong Yi looked at it delightfully and said, "Impatient, aren't you? Let's go, I'll bring you to get a bath." Watching Morong Yi disappear around the corner, Morong Shue followed the bluestone path and leisurely walked. From far, she heard a laughter like tinkling bells. She raised her eyebrows and followed the sound towards the main courtyard. Stepping into the courtyard, she saw a group of maids and housekeepers standing in front of the west wing. Each of them held a delicate ebony wood box. In the boxes were sapphire hairpins, ruby earrings, jasper bangles and other varieties of elegant jewelry, each one of them extremely valuable. A young girl in pink skirt was fluttering here and there between the delicate jewelry, wearing this and that. Her smile was brighter than the flowers. Morong Shue smirked and slowly walked towards them. "What are you all doing?" Upon hearing the cold voice, the maids and housekeepers turned around and casually bowed. "Young mistress." The girl in pink, Song Qin Yen, gave her a glance and carelessly said, "Cousin is back. Grandmother saw that I wearing too plainly, so she has decided to gift me some jewelry and is letting me choose." The grandmother that she mentioned is not Morong Shue's real grandmother, but her step-grandmother. She had given birth to a pair of brother and sister, Morong Jian and Morong Ro. The original Marquis Morong Yu was given birth to by the original wife. Song Qin Yen is the wife. Born eldest daughter of Wuan Marquis household and is Morong Ro's only daughter. Thus she was extremely pampered by the Marquis Dowager. Every time she visited the mansion, she would dress plainly, and when she went back, she would be well adorned and full of delicate jewelry. Morong Shue sneered internally and slowly said, "If grandmother is gifting you things, you should be picking from grandmother's treasury. Why are you picking from my mother's dowry?" Song Qin Yen froze midway while putting on an earring and frowned. Previously, when she had visited the mansion, she had always taken jewelry from here and Morong Shue had never said anything. Today, she actually mercilessly questioned her, "What's wrong with her? Your mother is my aunt. It's not too much for her to gift me a few pieces of jewelry, right? If my mother had personally said that she's giving it to you, that's called gifting. Taking the jewelry without my mother's permission is called thieving and robbing." On the last few words, Morong Shue's voice grew heavy and her tone turned into a merciless sneer. Song Qin Yen reddened and glared at her. "Your mother has been dead for 10 years, how am I supposed to speak to her?" "Morong Shue, enough is enough, don't be too much." Morong Shue's face darkened and she coldly said, "My mother's jewelry is being stolen by others. I've only asked a question and that's considered too much. Then isn't it worse that you as a noble's daughter is stooping to steal others' jewelry?" "I am not stealing anything," Song Qin Yen said fiercely. "I took the key and opened the lock and openly took out the jewelry." Morong Shue's mouth curled slightly, she was just waiting for her to say that. "Who is the keeper of the treasury keys?" "It's me." A 30-plus-year-old maid stood out, not a single piece of her hair out of place. Her face was clean but gaze was dark, one look and one would be able to tell that her was a sharp woman. "Somebody, drag her away and hit her 100 times with the paddles, then sell her," Morong Shue ordered harshly. The old maid was shocked and shouted in surprise, "Young mistress, what have I done wrong?" Morong Shue is very gentle and has never been angry at the servants. Why is she so fierce today, and even wants to punish her and sell her? "When my mother had passed you the keys, it was to ask you to guard the items within the treasury, not to give you the treasury. You did not ask the master's permission before privately opening the treasury. That's considered bullying the masters. Shouldn't you be sold off?" The original person was kind, resulting in some opportunistic servants forgetting who was the real owner of this treasury. She doesn't mind helping to remind them. Song Qinyan's face turned white. The old maid had opened the treasury, resulting in Morong Shue ordering the punishment by paddles and being sold off. Morong Shue looks like she's punishing the old maid but in actual is giving her a slap. Like killing the chicken to warn the monkeys, and giving oblique accusations, she has lost and yet she can't find a reason to rebuke. Morong Shue's ploy is really masterful and hateful. The old maid looked around for help only to see the other maids and housekeepers keeping their heads down, afraid to even breath too loudly for fear of angering Morong Shue. Since no one dared to help her, she can only save herself. The old maid gritted her teeth and loudly proclaimed, I wish to inform the young mistress that I was obeying the dowager lady's orders to open the treasury. Chapter 9, The Battle Against the Step-Grandmother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By Sandy. October 12, 201,622 comments. Shut up. Murong Shui slapped old maid Chio's face. You dare accuse the dowager lady when you had done wrong. Are you tired of living? Old maid Chio's face immediately formed a bright red five-fingered impression, hot and painful. A dark shadow formed across her eyes and she gnashed her teeth in anger, saying, Young mistress, I am really not lying. It really is the dowager lady, still dare argue. Murong Shui slapped her again till she fell to the ground, then she looked down upon her. She was going to harshly teach her a lesson when a strict voice rang, What's the commotion about? What's going on? She had only had a few sentences and help had arrived. How quickly servants in the Marquis mansion sends messages. However, the maids in front of the West Wing are all the dowager lady's servants. The only one not serving her is old maid Chio, and even she is a traitor. Of course that person would come so quickly. Please read only translator's website. Murong Shui's mouth curled into a sneer as she leisurely turned around. It was really the dowager lady Du slowly walking over with the support of a maid. Her white hair was tied up high, pinned lightly by a dark green jade pin. A dark gray head wrap with bamboo embroidery had been decorated with a piece of emerald, complementing the jade pin, dignified without losing its severity. Her mouth was tight and she glanced at old maid Chio with the swollen cheeks, frowning tightly. What's going on? Old maid Chio looked at her like she had found her backbone. Eyes bright and tears like broken pearls dripping down, both knees kneeling on the ground and kowtowing till it sounded, she said, Old mistress, save me. Young mistress wants to sell me away. Please read only translator's website www.novitranslate. Murong Shui raised her eyebrows and casually said, Old maid Chio opened the treasury without permission and had pushed the blame on to grandmother. By teaching her a lesson, I am helping the mansion discipline any bad practices. If not, some people will think that since they are more experienced, they can bully young masters and boss around the mansion. Please read only translator's website. Really? The dowager lady's cold sharp gaze passed over old maid Chio, whose forehead was red and swollen, then fell upon Murong Shui. But old maid Chio was not lying. I am the one that asked her to open the treasury to retrieve the jewelry. You are teaching the wrong person a lesson. For the sake of her precious granddaughter, she had ordered the servants to open her daughter-in-law's treasury without permission. That wouldn't sound good. But Du did not come up with excuses to push the blame and even admitted it straightforward. It seems that she really hates Murong Shui. If the original person had been standing here, she would definitely not be able to raise her head from the harsh scoldings of Du, but she is from a 21st century noble family and definitely wouldn't bow down to this old piety woman. Which law in Qinyan states that the step-mother-in-law can use her dead daughter-in-law's dowry at will. A dark shadow flashed across Du's eyes and she coldly looked at Murong Shui. When your mother married into the Marquis household, she had belonged to the household. Her dowry is naturally the Marquis household's assets. I manage the internal household and have the authority to touch anything related to the internal household. My treasury did not have any appropriate accessories, therefore it's only reasonable to ask Qinyan to pick a few pieces from here. Qinyan's law clearly states that when the first wife passes on, the dowry is passed on to her children. The things in this treasury is left behind by my mother for me and my brother and has nothing to do with anyone else in the Murong family. As long as my brother and I are still alive for a day, you, step-grandmother, have not right touch it. After her parents had died, Du had left Murong Shui in the Ruoxue court and did not care about her survival. In the few times she had seen her, if it was not to pick on something, then it was to reprimand her. If Du did not treat her like her granddaughter, then Murong Shui did not need to treat Du as her grandmother. Now, without my brother's or my permission, you have violated Qingyan's law by opening the treasury and picking from my mother's dowry. Really? Du glanced sideways to Murong Shui, her eyes full of disdain. Well then, step-granddaughter, are you prepared to sue your step-grandmother and send her to jail? The jewelries are still here and not lost. Step-grandmother need not go to court. You only need to beat his bullying and sly slave with 100 paddles and sell her off. Murong Shui said lightly. Upon hearing that, Du's face darkened. She was ridiculing Murong Shui, didn't Murong Shui understand? She actually followed along and decided old maid Chio's punishment. What a slow idiot. What are you waiting for? Didn't you understand the old mistress meaning? Drag old maid Chio down and beat her 100 paddles without mercy, then sell her. Murong Shui harshly instructed. Yes, ma'am. Two lowly old housemaids stepped forward and stuffed a rough piece of cloth into old maid Chio's mouth and dragged her out so quickly that others couldn't respond in time. Sounds from the paddle and old maid Chio's painful wails rang out. The maids and housekeepers looked at each other silently. The young mistress had lost her temper and they didn't want to be implicated. The dowager lady's face was so scarily dark as she stared at Murong Shui, haze forming beneath her eyes. Murong Shui pretended she didn't see it and quietly looked towards those ebony boxes which contained fine jewelry, closed the boxes and bring them back to the treasury. Yes, yes, yes. The maids answered. Carrying the boxes, they hurriedly ran back to the store, afraid that if they were to walk too slowly, Murong Shui would punish them and they would end up in a pathetic situation similar to old maid Chio. Looking at the empty courtyard, Song Qingyan paled and clenched her hands tightly under her sleeves. She had almost got the sapphire pin and ruby earrings, all of which she loved. Now it's all gone, how hateful. It's not the first time cousin Qingyan has taken jewelry from here, is it? Hearing the cold voice, Song Qingyan froze and looked cautiously at Murong Shui. What do you mean? Murong Shui laughed softly. You don't need to be flustered. I am not going to teach you a lesson but only ask that you return all the jewelry which you have taken. Song Qingyan secretly sighed in relief. She scared her. If Murong Shui is not thinking of teaching her lesson then that's good. However, the jewelry she had taken are all carefully chosen and each one of them are precious. She likes them very much and can't bear to return them to Murong Shui. Furthermore, she has been wearing those jewelries for so long, they should be hers already. You are my cousin. Just treat those few jewelries as presents that you have given to me. Don't you think it's too petty to ask me for them? Murong Shui glanced at her and casually said, Cousin, you come to the mansion at least thrice a month. Each time you would take away 2 to 3 hairpins, earrings, necklaces, jade bangles, finger sets and many other accessories. In these 2 years, you have not taken only a few pieces of jewelry but more than 100 pieces, enough to fill 3 trunks. Song Qingyan did not care, so what? Your mother had so much dowry. You are only lacking in these 100 pieces of jewelry. Murong Shui sneered. After snatching away others' jewelry, Song Qingyan can still be so righteous about it. How shameless. When my aunt got married, she also brought with her 10 miles of dowry. She definitely does not lack in jewelry. How about this, return my mother's dowry and give me another 2 or 3 trunks of delicate jewelry so that I can also enjoy my aunt's generosity. My mother's jewelry is mine. How can I give it to you? Song Qingyan exclaimed. Immediately after, she realized that she had been fooled and was just going to explain further when Murong Shui said first, my mother's jewelry was also left for me, how can it be in your hands? I want to see those jewelry before dark. If not, we'll see in court. Chapter 10, Naming the Tibetan Mastiff. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Because of such a petty matter you want to take it to court. Do you think that the Marquis household has too good a reputation or do you think that you have not lost enough face? The dowager lady coldly looked at Murong Shui and harshly reprimanded her. Do not air the family's dirty laundry. When other families have these type of scandals, they will try all sorts of ways to cover it up and hide it. This Murong Shui is great, as though she can't wait to announce to the whole capital. She doesn't know what's good for her. It is because you stole my mother's dowry, that's why I am taking it to court. Even if it will lose face, it is your faces that will be lost. Don't forget, our relationship is very sensitive. Murong Shui leisurely said, faintly smiling. The dowager lady's shrewd eyes narrowed. Murong Shui and Murong Ye's parents died when they were young, and she was not their directly related grandmother. Her youthful son and daughter are also not exactly Murong Shui and Murong Ye's uncle and aunt. If Murong Shui sues her and her children for conspiring to take their private assets, outsiders will definitely believe them. Please read only translator's website, Qin Yen, go home and bring back all the jewelry you have taken. The dowry and the treasury are all valuable items and she had been eyeing them for a long time and had been prepared to split them evenly between her Jenner and Rower. However, these things have to be done quietly and can definitely not let outsiders know about it. Grandmother. Song Qin Yen looked at Du, teary. Those jewelries were very delicate and beautiful, and she liked them very much. She didn't want to return even a single item. Grandmother can't help her fight for it. What now? You don't listen to me anymore. Quickly go back and return the jewelry. Du's face darkened. Returning the jewelry now is to pacify Murong Shui so that she will not pursue this issue. When Murong Shui lets her guard down, she will slowly scheme and swallow all the dowry in that entire treasury. Looking at her strict expression, Song Qin Yen froze and pitifulness accumulated in her eyes. Grandmother actually reprimanded her because of Murong Shui, how hateful. Please read only translator's website, Humph. Song Qin Yen stamped her feet and ran out wiping her tears. My mother's dowry is registered in the bureau. Any jewelry lost will be written on the list. I hope that when cousin Qin Yen returns the items, they are all real and not mixed in with fake items to hoodwink me. The cold caution rang out and Song Qin Yen paused, turned towards Murong Shui, gritting her teeth, don't worry cousin. Yenner is also the first wife's daughter of the Marquis mansion. I have countless jewelry, it is not worth it to steal such a bit. That's great then. Murong Shui casually replied, obviously not believing her. Song Qin Yen choked, anger stuck in her chest, unable to get out. She hatefully glared at Murong Shui and furiously walked out. Originally, she really had planned to casually return 2 boxes of jewelry to hoodwink Murong Shui. She didn't expect that Murong Shui would uncover her ploy and now she must return the real and beautiful jewelry. How very hateful. Please read only translator's website. A young maid walked quickly into the main courtyard and lowly muttered something in the dowager lady's ear. Her face immediately darkened and sharp gaze shot towards Murong Shui like arrows. You want to annul your engagement with Prince Jing? Please read only translator's website. Yes, that's right. Murong Shui nodded. When Yi Chen brought back his sweetheart and so that he is able to live a perfect life with his sweetheart, he demoted me to concubine. The public would point fingers if the Marquis household's first wife's daughter became a concubine. For the reputation of the household, I suggested annulling the engagement. Please read only translator's website. Marriage is determined by the parents and the matchmaker. How could you break off the engagement without the elder's permission? Du reprimanded her harshly. Murong Shui smiled faintly at her. The elder in your words refers to yourself, grandmother. Du's eyes turned cold. Your parents have both passed away. Even though I am not your blood-related grandmother, I am still your grandmother and can be justified as your elder. I am concerned about your marriage, is that wrong? Murong Shui glanced at her and leisurely said, the engagement between me and Prince Jing was set by my father and old Prince Jing without passing through the internal household's permission. As long as a male elder agrees, the engagement can be annulled, and need not go through grandmother's permission. Your second uncle, please read only translator's website. My second uncle is in Jingzhou and need more than a month to return. This matter is extremely urgent and there is no time to ask for his permission. My older brother is the current marquis. Older brothers are like fathers. He has already agreed to the annulment. Grandmother no longer needs to worry about this matter. Morong Shue smiled cheerfully at her, eyes flashing meaningfully. After Morong Yu died in battle, Du had happily though that the noble position would fall on Morong Jian. But the emperor had issued an edict letting only 4-year-old Morong Yi inherit the title and transferred Morong Jian to faraway Jingzhou. Till today, he hasn't been called back. This is the real reason why Du hates the brother and sister. Du's face was scarily dark. Demoting Morong Shue as concubine will definitely affect the marquis household's reputation, but in comparison to the household's reputation, she is more than happy to see Morong Shue run out of luck. After all, Morong Shue is Morong Yu's daughter and has not much to do with her. She could always draw the line. It's all Morong Ye's, that brainless playboy's, fault. He actually was convinced by Morong Shue and agreed to annul the engagement. How hateful. Please read only translator's website, woof woof. A flash of white sped in and jumped into Morong Shue's arms. Morong Shue looked down only to see a snow-white little dog lying in her arms, wet eyes looking at her, its adorable look melting hearts. Please read only translator's website. This is the Tibetan Mastiff that killed 5 large dogs. Morong Shue couldn't believe her eyes. Mastiff, little Tibetan Mastiff. Morong Yi breathlessly ran over only to see it cuddled in Morong Shue's arms acting all cute. He was immediately angered. I asked people to give you a bath and brush your fur, serving you comfortably. You speedily ran here without a word of thanks. Ungrateful little thing. It's still small and ignorant. Don't fuss over it anymore. Morong Shue rubbed the Tibetan Mastiff's little head and happily said, let's give it a name. It's not nice to keep calling it Tibetan Mastiff. Morong Yi brightened. His best at giving dogs names. It's awesome at fighting. Why don't we call it General Victory? Please read only translator's website. Morong Shue's bright face turned black. Now that it's with me, it will not go to the Colosseum anymore. Don't give it any names related to fights. Think of a normal one. He had fought dogs in the Colosseum for many years. All the names he had given were somewhat related to fighting. He had never really picked a normal name before. Morong Yi frowned. Seeing both of them getting along well, he casually suggested, sister, since you like this Tibetan Mastiff so much, why don't you call it Precious? Precious. Morong Shue raised her eyebrows, sounds weird. Then how about Baby? Morong Yi softly suggested. Seeing her gradually darkening face, he quickly changed, called it Bebe. Please read only translator's website, Bebe. That's alright, let's call it Bebe then. Morong Ye's standard of picking names is only as such, and Morong Shue couldn't think of an especially good name either, so they settled on Bebe. Looking at the happily talking Morong Shue and Morong Yi, Du's face darkened. 2 juniors conversing as though there was no one else and entirely ignoring her presence. Are they purposely treating her as transparent or prepared to show her off? Please read only translator's website. Her lips moved and she was just about to teach them a lesson when Morong Shue spoke up first. Since cousin Qin Yan will need at least 2 hours before she can return the jewelry, Hong Qiu, lock the treasury first and bring the key over. Please read only translator's website. Yes, ma'am. Hong Qiu curtsied and locked the treasury door before putting the key in Morong Shue's hands. Morong Shue planned to personally oversee the treasury. Du's eyes flashed and she loudly said, nobles in the capital always pass the key to their personal maids to manage. As a noble lady, you actually want to personally manage these material goods. Are you not afraid of becoming a laughing stock? I don't have any old maids that I can trust, so I can only personally keep the key. When I find someone I can trust, I will naturally pass the key to her. Grandmother need not worry. Morong Shue slowly said, rebuking her words. Du choked and a dark haze flashed beneath her eyes. If the treasury key is in Murong Shue's hands, she wouldn't be able to find a chance to swallow the dowry within it all. Year, persuade your sister. An unmarried lady worried all day about her dowry. Is she not afraid of others laughing at her? Murong Yi frowned and quietly said, Grandmother, my sister is already 14 years of age and she will soon marry. There is nothing wrong in learning how to manage her dowry and the matters of the internal household. You. Du was furious and her bitter cold gaze swept from Murong Yi to Murong Shui and from Murong Shui to Murong Yi. She wanted to say something but ultimately did not speak it. She loudly tooted and without a glance backwards, she turned and walked out. Looking at her retreating back, Murong Yi was confused, did I say something wrong? Not at all. Grandmother is happy that you have matured. Murong Shui smiled brightly and comforted him. Her eyes were slightly cold. Du is probably resenting that they had cut off her fortune. Du has her eyes on the dowry and will definitely think of a million ways to get it. However, she is not afraid of them, she will just deal with it as it comes.